Thanks so much to everyone for being here. I'm available if you need anything.
Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you so much to Molly and the team at Open Mouth. I'm thrilled to be here. We only have an hour, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for you to write and to have some takeaways for thinking about first lines and beginnings of poems. I titled this First Lines, First Moves because, as we know, sometimes the first line is more than a line. A couple of things before we start. I just want to second using the chat. It's a way for us to keep the conversation. I do know that for some of us, reading the chat and reading the captions and looking at people simultaneously is impossible. So, use it if you'd like to. When we do have some sharing, this is great. I think we'll be able to have more people share since we'll be sharing first lines. But what I'll ask is no disclaimers, no explanations. We're going to keep these short so that we can have more people share who would like to, even though we have a short amount of time. So when we talk about a poem's beginning, we're really mean two things. One is its creation. Where did it come from? How did it get there? What tools did we use? Already in the early chat, we had Laverne saying, I have an idea, and sometimes that leads to research. And Melissa, there's a moment or a feeling that I tease out. And I'm sure there'll be more coming up in there, but we all have these different ways of what is that mysterious place where a poem comes from. And there's some great, Mary Ruefle talks about this in her Madness, Rack and Honey chapters on beginnings. It's just fantastic if you haven't read it before. Um, but then there's also, besides where a poem comes from, that mystery of creation, is where do we want the poem itself to begin? How do we want to bring the reader into the poem? Do we want to drop them in? Do we want to ease them in? What kind of invitation? And of course, it's hard to think of a beginning on its own. Every beginning is tied to the poem it becomes, and the poem often takes us in a different direction. So today is really to get us thinking and generating and maybe revising. For some of you, this might lead to new poems. For some of you, you might do what I have my grad students do is I have a whole directory of modes of beginnings, and we revise, do multiple beginnings for the same poem and kind of see what it does to the poem. So take what works for you and leave the rest. And all prompts are there to inspire you. Rules are free to be broken. Um, Okay, so hopefully you have seen the document that we have here. You can follow along if you like, the Google link in the chat. And you'll see that I've made this so this links to all the poem examples. We won't be talking about full poems today in the interest of time, but you can go back and read all of these poems in your own time. So we're going to talk, I have three sections. We're going to talk about three modes of poem beginnings. I'll talk briefly, you'll do some writing, and we'll do some sharing. And that will be kind of our model here. And the first one is narrative elements. So thinking about where, when, who. If you're anything like me, you maybe haven't thought about that much in a poem, right? But a poem doesn't have to always start out in the abstraction, out in the ether. It can begin somewhere concrete. So I gave you some examples in establishing the setting. We have Frank O'Hara's It's 12:20 in New York, a Friday, 3 days after Bastille Day. Yes, it is 1959. Pretty specific, grounding us in a place and time, and that's for the day Lady died. Um, Jimmy Santiago Baca's 4:30 in bed. I left off that in bed. I corrected on the document. Hopefully you can see that. That's 4:30 in the morning in bed. That tied in to the title. We already have a feeling of where this poem is going. And then a much more lyrical approach to the same thing. John Murillo's Renegades of Funk, this wonderful sonnet sequence begins, when we were 12, we taught ourselves to fly. And in that sequence, it's also the last line of the poem. So we can see how, the specificity of taking us to a time or a place, or sometimes it's introducing us to a character. Alice Notley, I met Ted at two parties at the same house. Okay, we learn a little bit about Ted and a little bit about the speaker. They keep going back to parties at this house. But who is this Ted? We also might know that this might is tied to a real Ted in the world, perhaps. But and then we have Robert Hayden's Sundays to My Father Got Up Early, right? We're getting the father, but we're also learning a little bit about him. And that, if you know that poem, it's very important, not just the days that he had to work, but the days they got up to care and show love in a certain way to his children. So as you're thinking about where your poems begin, I want to take a little sidebar and think about your own trends. And this is something you can do on your own time. If you have a manuscript, a great exercise I like to do when working with books is to read out loud all the first lines in a row of your book. And if you don't have a manuscript yet, you can still do this with all the poems you've written so far. And they tell their own story. They tell the story of the arc of the book or the arc of your work. Also reveal if you just might, like most of us, have some habits of how you begin your poems. And even if that's what gets us into the poem, that revision is the place where we can go back to that habit. Like, okay, unless it's really purposeful, I might not want to start every poem with "It's 12:20 in New York." That could be an interesting book, actually. Someone can take that idea. So what I'm going to ask you to do for this first writing prompt is to think about, and you can use memory or you can use imagination. So think about a time, a place, maybe there's characters in it, and maybe you don't want to look backwards. Maybe you're like me, tired of the four walls of this house, and I'm thinking of Henri Kohl's line in the Doria Pampili garden. I've never been there, but that poem makes me want to travel into the poem and go there. So our poems are where we can travel anywhere, even in the pandemic. So go ahead and play with the first line in which you're bringing us time, place, or person with some kind of specificity that reveals. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to play around. Maybe you try a few new ones. Maybe you take something and it keeps you writing. And hey, if you end up going off onto a poem and miss the rest of this next hour, that's fine too. Our job here is done. So go ahead and we'll just kind of work quietly for a moment and work on those first lines. And I'm going to put those directions in the chat as well with your writing if you need that extra guidance. But otherwise, we get to write together for a little bit. So I'm going to interrupt for a moment, and we're just going to have another minute or so on this. But think about your line break. This doesn't just have to be a first line, it's a first move, right? 4:30 break in bed. John Maria's line break, very pointed. So as you're working for this next minute on getting that first line going, or maybe you keep going from that first line, be thinking about what actually do you want to reveal in the first line and how you might use your line break and lead into the second line if that's useful. All right. So you've had a little time to work on this line, and I've been catching up on the chat and seeing some other ways that people begin their poems. We have Romy who says it starts with messy associative free writes. And we also have Bailey, lists of imagers and words that feel cool to me. I love hearing all the different ways that people get started and that maybe we can steal from one another. Like, that's a great idea. Make a list of cool words, right? Or what is it that we do when we feel stuck? I'd love to hear some of those first lines. You're welcome to share some in the chat. I know all of us don't necessarily want to speak to a room full of people on screen, but also we can use the hand raise function. And please forgive me if, since we haven't had proper introductions, if I mispronounce your name, and you can say your name once it's there. So raise your hand if you'd like to share your line. And I've got 2 pages here, so I'm moving back and forth. Oh, it's Mela.
Hi, it's Mila.
Mila.
Yeah, and I apologize if it's loud. I'm outside and it's sunny, so everyone's riding their motorcycles. So my first line that I came up with is, "It was a perfect summer day in Sarasota when you found the body. The bones picked so clean, you weren't certain exactly what it was."
It was a perfect summer day in Sarasota when you found the body. Yeah, snaps. I think something feels really cold about the silent clap to me. So snaps. I love it. I love the way the sounds come into that as well.
Thank you.
And the naming, the specificity, right? Makes me want to keep reading. All right, I saw there was some Lynn, yes. And also the hand seem to disappear after a while, so don't be afraid to keep clicking it, people, if you raise your hand. I didn't see you. So Lynn, will you share yours?
Yes, and I actually just found out why the hands disappear. It's because we accidentally click the like clappy hands instead of the raise hand button. So if that's happening to you, make sure you're clicking the raise hand button and then you'll click the lower hand button. I just found this out.
Thank you. We're all keep learning on Zoom, don't we?
It's so hard. So my first line says, in the early 2000s, sure, cell phones existed, but not smartphones yet.
In the early 2000s. I mean, what a great way of expanding this, that it can go to a period, right? That might mean something to us. We're going to have to keep moving quickly. So Natalie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to say that I have a line break after living room, since we were mentioning line breaks. On Sundays, I water the living room plants, the ones that tendril and spike.
Nice. Snaps. Really interesting line break there, and then we're sort of drawn into a space with this speaker, right? There's an intimacy with that beginning, with that sort of tender daily task. I saw some other hands. Sarah.
Hi, Morgan. Thank you for doing this workshop. I'm so excited. Um, Sick days in third grade, Michael Landon became my father.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Sick days in third grade, Michael Landon became my father.
Thank you. Snaps. Okay, got to keep wanting to read this, right? Very specific, a time, a space, and a character all in one. And a character, we just see what is the difference between if the character are your plants, intimate in your household, or a famous figure, right? What are all the different ways that that can set the tone of a piece? Also, I just want to give a shout out to Open Mouth that this is accessible. I asked to repeat, and then I realized I had the captions right there. So kudos to them. It's just pretty exciting. Okay, I have time for one more. If there was a hand that I missed, and then we should move on to the next one. Anyone else?
I think Laverne has a hand up.
Okay, thank you. Laverne? Yes, sorry. I keep moving between the two screens. You can unmute yourself, Laverne.
That would be helpful. Okay, give me one second.
Hi.
Hi. It's 4:35 in the afternoon, and the 4:37 train to Chicago just left the station.
The specificity and of the train. I mean, we've already learned a lot about that story, right? The train left early. Who has been there? Yes. Great. I love it. And I want to know the consequences, right? I mean, we can, even if we're not writing a narrative poem, narrative elements set us up for something to happen in the poem. That poem might go on to tell a story, or it might engage us in a moment, but we're there, present. We know there is, well, tension, and you can think about how much tension even giving narrative detail can give in the first line of a poem. So try that out on your own, and maybe even with your revisions, right? A poem that you're feeling stuck, you don't love the way it's beginning. Well, now that you've written the poem, where, when did it happen? Was it in the early 2000s? Was it at, 7:4? I forgot the time already, but 7:37 or whatever that time is. Maybe that might bring something into the poems. And I agree with Josephine's comment here. I want to read the rest of these poems. Okay, so keep going. Hopefully your Sunday afternoon's free to keep going. All right, but we're going to move on to this next category, which I like to call the thesis. Susan Luminello's The Promise of the First Line describes it as the "it was" beginning, which she says can express a viewpoint on life and establish a thesis the author must prove or disprove. And I think, most poems are making some kind of argument about being, right, in some way. And sometimes that's explicit. So the examples you can see I gave you are the famous W.H. Auden, about suffering, they were never wrong. Okay, tell me about it, right? Who they fuck you up, your mom and dad, Philip Larkin, and This Be the Verse. Or Elizabeth Bishop's The Art of Losing Isn't Hard to Master. And I think often about this idea of authority in a poem. And I wrote a poem in my new book about this from a student saying, who am I to use third person in a poem? That really came out of a question from a student. Who am I to have authority to make a claim about the world? And I think we want to encourage all of us that, well, everyone knows it's subjective. We're reading a poem written by a person, right? But we can make our claims about our experience in the world. And I hope you might try that out. But I also want to give you a few options here. The other is asking a question. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, or How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I mean, you see how the question poems that sort of endure, and there's so many wonderful new ones as well. But so maybe we don't feel in the place to make the thesis. Maybe we don't feel in the place to ask a question, right? But those can kind of do similar things, because we expect that the poem might, if not necessarily answer the question, but explore it. Also, command. How-to poems are a big thing. I love to write them and teach them. And actually, if you go to the Poetry Foundation website and search their poems by how-to, you can get a bunch of how-to poems to see them. But this Dana Levin poem that begins, "Say stop." I think this is really compelling. It's simple, right? But there's a lot of different directions that could go. So for your next first move writing prompt, try out one, at least one, maybe some of us work quickly, we'll try out a few. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes here to, I really urge you to try out the thesis and the question. And actually, sidebar, we're going to do something fun before we jump into this to get you doing the questions. This is a surrealist game. So if you're on a piece of paper, you might even just draw a line so to know that the two things you're going to write right now are separate. Write a question, and this is like a question that could be in a poem. So separately, write a question. This is the game part. It's not the serious writing prompt, but we're still poets in here. Write a question, any question. And then somewhere else on the page, so that you know it's not connected to that question, write an answer. That is a statement, something that doesn't end in a question. And as you complete either of these, you can type them into the chat. So if we were in person, we would be writing this on scraps of paper or folding over a piece of paper, because we're going to randomly pair questions and answers. So without even looking what anyone else is writing, type your question into the chat or your sentence into the chat, and I'll read you some of our surrealist collaborative outcomes. I'm waiting for some answers here. They're great questions. Okay, yeah. We've got some great questions and answers, and I'm going to go them in the order. Poem number 1. Does it hurt? 3 oranges peeled in perfect spirals. Who was the other one? It is always a left turn. How long does it take to trust winter's gone? Have another. How did you walk into the woods that day? I don't know when the storm will start. What was the first word I ever learned? Not necessarily spoken, but the first whose meaning I understood, because I didn't have any money. I'm not sure that's my first time trying to do this on Zoom, but I think it was kind of cool. I hope you can see the idea, the surrealist game of chance, right? That you have one writer writing a question and someone else writes an answer that hasn't seen the question, and you put them together, and sometimes wonderful and strange things happen. So hopefully that loosened you up to 1, write some questions, 2, make some statements, and also think about how if you start with a question, it doesn't have to be an obvious lead in to the next line, right? You can go somewhere surprising. So now we will go into our writing prompt, and again, I'll type this into the chat in case you need that there as well as a reminder. But either writing a first line that's a thesis, making sort of claim about what it is to be human, to love, to lose, or maybe something on a smaller scale. It can be about anything, or you can ask a question or a command. And maybe if you asked a question in the chat already, you might keep that going into your own poem. So trying one of those 3 modes, and I have 2:32 here on Central. I'm going to give you 3 minutes on this one. So you might get 1 first line, you might get 3 first lines, or you might take one of those first lines into the start of a poem, however you want to use those 3 minutes. And I'll be here in the chat if you have questions or if you want to share. And let's go. writing together across the world. All right, it's come time to come back. Once again, you're welcome to share in the chat and also to raise your hands. And I think I saw Mila had her hand up already.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I lost signal and I had to go inside. What was the prompt?
Oh, it looks like Gwen just put it
Oh,
in
yeah.
the chat.
I see it. Thank you.
There you go. Sure. Welcome back. I'm scrolling through here, looking to see if anyone's raising hands. If you could use the reaction, that's also easier to see. Thesis, questions, commands. I see Josephine's here. Grief salts the dirt inside. What could have grown is choked. Beautiful beginning. Now I want to ask follow-up questions, but but as Gwen says, I just got chills. You know, the details in there, right, and the juxtaposition. Grief salts, a good verb. Now, I think that would be the next exercise if we had over an hour. I'd say bring an unexpected verb pairing into your first line. I just got that from Josephine's. Laverne here. There's a reason why we have one mouth. Could I finally win an argument with you if I had two mouths? Could I speak the truth and tell a lie at the same time? Now I want to, Laverne, is it all right if I ask you a question? Were those three different ones, or they also just moved sort of amazingly together?
No, I did my premise or my thesis first, and then I just asked some questions that would be implications of the thesis.
Yeah, I mean, which is terrific, but I also think they move pretty amazingly in answer to the question. That makes me want to keep reading. That's pretty cool. Seeing statement and question. We talked about question and statement before, but that makes me think, what happens when you invert it, right? and let a question be the second line. So thanks for that. Bailey, I see your hand up.
It is possible every dog has at one time wondered if you are their god.
A starting thesis, but qualified, right? It is possible. And all of that idea that we can, what kind of conditionality, right? Or way do we sort of modify that authority? And it is possible brings a lot of voice into that. I see Lynn's hand up as well. Lynn?
Sorry, that mute button. Everyone loses their baby teeth in small doses.
The universal everyone, right? I mean, raise your hand. Who has felt brave enough to start a poem with everyone? I'm going to give us all that assignment. I'm giving myself that assignment too. Like, be brave and start a poem with everyone. Let's speak for everyone. And right, because of course, what that does is when we think about what are statements that is your thesis, your first line, going to make the reader want to immediately ask questions and be ready to counter argue, right? And then you're sort of moving with their arguments in there. Are there other raised hands? Oh, I see another in the chat. Melissa, can you miss a person you never knew? 3 oranges peeled in perfect spirals left to share on the counter. With who? Why choose to make that moment? Fingers sticky. The table needed to be cleaned now, and now the orange stands out against the laminate, glowing, able to be found in the dark. I've been focusing on the words and forgetting to snap. Gorgeous. And but notice how the questions, there's not just one. Melissa, you started with a question and then brought in other questions, right? Think about that. What the move you make in the first line. The first line's not in a vacuum. It's creating opportunities throughout the poem. Return to the question, with who, right? Because that really feels like the burning question in this, and then moving into great specific detail. Jody's, there comes a point when a machine will be used for a purpose other than the one for which it was invented. Ew. What? A thesis that gives us the stakes, right? Oh, let's find out about these conditions, and this feels high stakes as well. David, the echo chamber is a lung. I mean, metaphor as statement. I love that, right? How are the ways that we let ourselves make a statement through a metaphor? Think about that for yourself as writer. Are you comfortable if it's a metaphor, but not if it's a real statement? Or are you comfortable if it's a concrete statement, but not if it's a metaphor? Try out the other mode. We see Romy, who was the other one? Have another. Segment the orange, section the plate. It's because the cat is skittish. Does it hurt if I press here or here? Oh, another great return of the question. Does it hurt if I press here or here? The deepening and the repetition. Love seeing these examples. We should move on, but this is so great, and I'm so grateful that people are feeling comfortable sharing and keep seeing these poems that need to be written. All right. The last one might seem like a sort of straightforward one. You know, I have a huge chart of these that I teach with, and I thought image, you know, don't underestimate the starting with an image, right? Because as we think about how we welcome people into a poem, that use of the senses, right? This way that we can connect. And you know, they've done studies now to show that when we're reading, when we read imagery, that often same parts of the brain light up than as we're actually experiencing those images in real life, right? So that we have a way of actually getting our reader to respond with their body. I'm thinking about that, you know, with these orange images, right? And all these things, we go smelling it, we're tasting it, our brain's on fire. Some of the examples here, you see on the handout the question that said, do you invite the reader in through the senses, through evoking the physical world around us? Are your images realistic, or do they work in the world of dream, of metaphor, of juxtaposition, or imagination? Um, the examples I gave you are Robert Pinsky's shirt, the back, the yoke, the yardage, lapped seams. Right? What are the details that you bring together that show you know the world that you're about to talk about and might intrigue your reader? Robin Costa Lewis's element of furniture decoration begins two Nubian prisoners bound to a post, protome, probably the handle of a whip. Right? Ekphrastic and also extremely telling, beginning to tell a larger story. And then suitcases of dried limes, dried figs, pomegranate paste. Sharif gives us that sort of tactile combination. I was interested in first lines that had combinations because I thought that might be a good exercise for us, right? If you're thinking, again, this will be a two-part. You're going to have a concrete real world example, or the other examples I gave you are from complex or surreal images. James writes, The Jewel, there is this cave in the air behind my body. Or Frank O'Hara's, my quietness has a man in it. He is transparent. So choose a path, or maybe some of you will have time for two. But if you're working with realistic and image and description, particularly think about juxtaposition. I left the more simple one, the Li Young Lee's in the steamer is the trout. But for today's purpose, I think try something that gives us maybe a little more in that first line, just for the fun of it. Some juxtaposition or some joining, right? Maybe it's a list like Pinsky or Sharif. What can you bring into a list that is going to be evocative for a reader? Or if you are moving with the complex or surreal image, what things can you bring together? There is this cave. Okay, there's a cave. It gets strange and in the air behind my body. Or my quietness has a man in it. The strangeness is in the first part of the clause, right? He is transparent is where it gets strange. So let yourself think about how, one, you bring things together in this first line, and also what order, right? It's not just what you're bringing together, but the order. Do we start with the real and move to the strange, right? Do we start with a stronger sense, move to something much different? So give it a try. Again, I'll rewrite these directions in the chat, and I have 2:45 my time here. So I'm going to once again give you 3 minutes so you can either try a few or keep going with the poem. And let's just be in the space together, writing a little more. feel free to start sharing those in the chat. Thanks, Laverne, for getting us started with that. And also, I'm going to just give another 20 seconds for anyone to kind of wrap up, and we'll have some, hopefully, some vocal sharing as well. All right, loving seeing these coming in through the chat. Let's start with is there anyone who wants to share over the screen before we move to the chat? I'd love to hear some voices in the mix. Any hands? Okay, with the chat, this is the, we have a lot happening here in the chat. So Laverne's, his sneakers were impeccably clean as they were rare. White leather, red stripes, and a scribbly autograph on the front of each shoe. Wonderful. We could see, I think what's interesting is looking at these is some of these are also a bit of a thesis, right? They were as impeccably clean as they were rare. That is just terrific because it's bringing both something concrete and the claim. And then we move into the details down to the scribbly. The verticals are melting through the scene. Ooh. Snap, we've practiced snaps for Laverne and now snaps for David Donna. The strange melting, the verticals of the melting through the scene. Let's see where those images take us. The sideways rain quakes the dog. There we go with those exciting verbs. The ocean in New Hampshire is always bone liquefying cold. This is from Lynn, but the salt tastes better than North Carolina. Claim another thesis as well, right? As we're seeing that juxtaposition. Sarah, I was old before I was young, little woman lost in my mother's anger. Another claim in there, in a sense, a self-claim, covered from Lily, covered in cinnamon. I guess I'll sleep with the light on. Delightful juxtaposition. Start covered in cinnamon, right? It's very both multiple senses. Cinnamon, we can smell it and feel it. What does that mean to have cinnamon all over your body? And Melissa, the figure of her crooked on the wall, sits reckless and humming, a constant tea kettle ready to be emptied. I cannot take it down. That just reminds me of one of the things that an interesting opening image can do. It pulls us in, this image, right? And then the move to the I cannot down, right? How different the poem, not saying bad or good, but what a different poem if it had begun, I cannot take it down. The picture of her crooked on the wall, right? Beginnings, and as we revise with beginnings, are a reminder to us of how when we give readers information changes the emotional impact, right? There we are looking at the image. I think that I cannot take it down coming 4 lines in has a lot more power 4 lines in after the image, right? Anyone else who wants to share as we're going through? All right. We've got about 8 more minutes. And of course, the first thing we're going to do is a little more writing. So now you have at least 3 first lines, maybe more. And what I want to ask you to do is to take the next 2 minutes to go for it and keep writing. And before we come to the final share, one of the things that I always want to remind myself and others in classes is that we all know that you've done all of these prompts in 2 minutes, right? And I think that's a beautiful, like if I've worked on a poem for weeks or months, it's a little scarier to share it to someone than when it's hot off the press. And in the spirit of vulnerability, I'm going to tell you, I've been taking beginning mandolin classes where you have to play in front of a screen full of strangers on Zoom. Playing your remedial mandolin. So if I can do that, maybe hopefully some of you all will share some of these poems. That's my my admission. So let's go under 2 more minutes to keep going with your poems and go. Let's just be in this space writing, continuing, and hopefully we'll hear some of these at the other end. Let's come back together, and I'm hoping that we might be able to fill our space with some poems, with some voices of poems. It's fine if you want to share things in the chat. I won't be reading your full poems out loud, but you can share those there. But I'd love to hear some of your voices and see the direction some of these lines might start taking you. Do I have any volunteers? Lynn.
Oh, yay, hi. So my poem says, the ocean in New Hampshire is always bone liquefying cold, but the salt tastes better than North Carolina. Jackie brings the kids once a year, freshwater guppies, learning about the risks of undertows, the power of waves. I tell them about the wave that once held me down so long I believed in God and heaven again. I tell them about the ocean floor scraping across my skin like an emery board pushing too hard. When the next big wave comes, we brace our bodies and dive in. Instead, winter crashes into the chambers of my arrhythmic heart, my body frozen, untrustworthy to move. It is the first time I realize if the guppies go in over their heads, I will not be able to bring them back to safety.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Josephine.
Oh, thank you. And that was wonderful, Lynn. Grief salts the dirt inside. What could have grown is choked. Did the pentas bloom again in the rental we left last year? Garden planted in memoriam, abandoned. May it flourish in our absence. Our neighbor dug up a clump of dirt, roots and stem of cardinal guard, potted it, a housewarming gift. It will die here.
Thank you so much, Josephine. It's so hard to hold myself back from saying things about these wonderful first two poems. I want to make sure we have time for if I think we have time maybe for one more share before I leave you with some notes. I want to be respectful of your time. Was there anyone else? Just want to make sure I don't miss a hand. Okay. Laverne.
Sorry, unless someone else wants to go. Spring never ends in March. There are teases, geese honking to clear out the skies as they pump their way north, melted snow forming a trail to the curbside gutter, children daring to play outside without a jacket until their mothers drape one over their shoulders, poets writing poems about little shoots of flowers edging the way above ground, all so encouraging to make us think about ordering garden seeds, trying on old bathing suits, and planning summer cookouts. But first, get the shovel out here. But first, get the shovel. Here comes another snowstorm.
Wonderful. What a great note to end on, Laverne. And thank you everyone for sharing your first lines, sharing your poems. I wish we had more time. I'm gonna just leave you with some takeaways, questions that you can ask about your first lines as you're writing or revising. What does it offer the reader? How does it speak to the last line? What does it leave unanswered? So there's room in the poem. And why is this the first line? Because as you're revising, sometimes I love to do a cut and paste where you look and you say, how many poems and lines in here actually could be the first line, right? Sometimes there's only one, but sometimes there's a few. And why this? What opportunities does it give me? And what opportunities might the other first line give? And so I'll end there because I know you have your afternoons to go on with, and hopefully for some of you that's to stay at your writing table and keep writing. And thanks again to all of you and to Open Mouth and for having me.
Thank you so much, Morgan. What a like wonderful creative space. I usually find that I can't write in these situations, but like taking the pressure off of writing a whole poem and just writing those first lines was really freeing for me. So thank you. And also just thank you for being here. Thank you for spending your time with us. Thank you for putting together this wonderful workshop. A couple other thank yous I want to say before we wrap up. Thanks to everyone who came today for making this a space that feels warm and lovely. Thanks, of course, to our interpreter, Megan, who does such an amazing job. We are so grateful that Megan works with us. Megan will also be interpreting at the reading this evening. So we hope that you'll come to the reading. Gwen put the link in the chat. Also, I want to encourage you to buy Morgan's book. We're going to put a link for that in the chat as well. Poets really, that's very important for poets to have their books in readers' hands. So please do, if you can spare the cash, buy Morgan's book. And then just want to say one more time that we do have, this will be available on the Patreon, this workshop. So if you want to revisit it, and we are trying to get 25 people this month to sign up to be $5 Patreon supporters so that we can make sure that we can sustainably pay for interpretation. So that's in the chat as well. And then other than that, I hope that you'll come to the reading. We have an access feedback form that we'll post in the chat as well. So if you used any of our accessibility services today, we'd really like to know how that went for you. And if you have any thoughts about how we can make the space more accessible. So thank you. I hope you keep writing. Thank you so much, Morgan. I'm really excited to hear you read tonight. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, poets. Thank you.